My boss mocked my old car in the company parking lot. "Your junk is ruining our image," he shouted. The next day, I stepped off a helicopter as the new CFO. I had it all mapped out. 3 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days. That was the precise window I needed to execute my flawless revenge on Richard Novak, the man who had stolen my promotion at TexPro Analytics in Austin through a nasty game of office politics and outright sabotage. "Your junk is ruining our image," he had screamed at me across the parking lot, pointing at the 1995 Ford Escort I deliberately kept. Little did he know that I, Hannah Campbell, was already the company's new majority shareholder, and every single humiliation was being meticulously cataloged for the final takedown. Just 347 days earlier, I was standing in my best navy blue pantsuit from Kohl's. Yes, Kohl's, because a senior financial manager's salary at TexPro doesn't exactly scream designer. I'd even stopped by Maria's, that little salon near the 4th Street Metro Rail station, for a proper blowout. Why all the effort? Because after 7 long years of grinding through Excel spreadsheets and corporate dust, I was finally about to be promoted to Chief Financial Officer. Or so everyone thought, including my naive self. As I grabbed a quick coffee in the break room with my best friend Trish, I mentally rehearsed my acceptance speech. I'd like to thank the board for their confidence. Ugh, so cliché, so predictable. But what else do you say when you've sacrificed countless nights of precious sleep just to deliver impeccable reports? Trish squeezed my hand. "Relax, Hannah, you've earned this more than anyone. 7 years, 3 excellence awards, and that time you single-handedly saved the Rio Grande project without getting an extra dime for it." The moment of truth arrived when the CEO opened the conference room doors. And there he was, Richard Novak, clad in a ridiculously expensive Italian suit with a toothpaste commercial smile plastered on his face, a smile that never quite reached his cold, calculating eyes. Something felt wrong in the air the moment he began presenting his financial projections. And yes, his is in heavy quotes because I built those numbers from the ground up. Then, like watching a tidal wave approach in slow motion, I heard the words, "We've decided that Richard will be our new CFO. We need someone with more executive presence." Executive presence? Seriously? Is that just corporate code for he's a man and I'm not? I have no idea how I managed to walk out of that room without bursting into tears, screaming, or, even better, launching the glass water pitcher at Richard's perfectly coiffed head. I smiled, mumbled something about being happy for the company's new direction, and practically sprinted to the 3rd-floor restroom, the one nobody ever uses because it's too far from the coffee machine. Locking myself in the last stall, I finally let the silent tears fall. It wasn't about the title. It was about pouring my life into this company, only to watch Richard, a guy who spent the last few years playing golf with clients and taking credit for other people's work, waltz into my future. That's when the restroom door swung open, and I heard the voices of Marcia and Louisa, the directors of marketing and HR. Did you see Hannah's face? Poor thing. Rick totally cooked the books on those projections. I froze, holding my breath. "What did you expect? He golfs with the CEO's brother-in-law," the other replied dismissively. "He had her emails with the correct forecasts deleted. My husband is in IT and saw the request from Rick to clean up her inbox. It's disgusting." In that instant, I felt something inside me shift. The tears stopped as if a faucet had been shut off. A chilling calm washed over the despair, and for the first time in my life, I truly understood what it meant to have ice in your veins. I don't know how long I stayed in that stall, breathing slowly as a new plan began to crystallize. This wouldn't be simple revenge. It would be justice. And justice, much like the dark roast I drink every morning, is a dish best served cold. Have you ever felt like a dormant volcano, suddenly aware of the eruption building inside you? Yeah, me neither. Until that day. That night, instead of drowning my sorrows in a pint of Ben & Jerry's while binging reality TV, as post-humiliation protocol would dictate, I spread dozens of financial reports across my dining room table, which, honestly, hadn't seen a real dinner party since I bought it. Something buried in those numbers wasn't adding up. TexPro Analytics was in far deeper trouble than it was letting on. The stock was poised for a nosedive as soon as certain contracts went public. The irony was poetic. Richard had just inherited a sinking ship, and I was the only one who seemed to have the real treasure map. My phone rang, cutting through my calculations. It was Aunt Odette, my mom's sister, and my only living relative since I lost my parents in a car crash 5 years ago. "Honey, I sold your mother's old house in Annapolis, the one you never wanted to live in because it held too many memories." Her cheerful voice was a stark contrast to my apocalyptic spreadsheets. "The money is already in your account. $2 million, Hannah. Your mom would be so happy to know you can finally use it for something special." Something special? A slow smile spread across my face as I stared at the downward trajectory of TexPro's stock chart. I made a quick mental list. 1. New shoes, those Louboutins I saw at Neiman Marcus and pretended were ugly because they cost a month's rent. 2. That ridiculously expensive handbag from that boutique at the Domain. 3. Secretly buy the company I work for to utterly destroy the man who stole my promotion. I think I'll skip straight to number 3. Normally, $2 million wouldn't be nearly enough to acquire a 51% stake in TexPro. But with the undisclosed crisis looming, the shares would soon be on sale for a fraction of their worth. I'd need a few investors, some creative accounting of my own, and a whole lot of patience. Could you wait months for the perfect revenge? Because, surprisingly, I discovered I could. Crafting that email to request a leave of absence for personal issues was almost fun. I chose the most boring font I could find, Arial, size 11, and filled it with phrases like, "I need to step away to handle some delicate matters," and "I appreciate your understanding during this difficult time." Was it dramatic? Maybe. But not nearly as dramatic as the rumors that started flying 5 minutes after I hit send. According to Trish, my inside source, the HR team was betting on a major depressive episode, while the marketing crew was convinced it was classic burnout. My personal favorite came from accounting. I always knew she couldn't handle the pressure. Little did they know, while they envisioned me sobbing in the shower to some sad Taylor Swift album, I was actually on a chartered helicopter, rented of course, I'm not that rich yet, soaring over the San Francisco Bay, on my way to a meeting with a Japanese venture capital firm. "Ms. Campbell, your projections are quite compelling, Mr. P." Tanaka said from behind his round glasses, his eyes fixed on my analysis of TexPro's imminent collapse. "Are you confident we can acquire a controlling interest at this valuation?" I simply smiled, smoothing down the lapels of my impeccably tailored suit, a world away from the frumpy attire I'd soon be adopting for my traumatic return to the office. The very same night we sealed the first phase of the deal with the Japanese investors, Richard was posting on Instagram. He was celebrating my departure with celebratory cocktails at some trendy rooftop bar in downtown Austin. The caption read, "First week as CFO in the books, crushing it. Blessed March leadership March hustle." All this while I was busy signing documents that would grant me a 27% stake in the company. The remaining 24% would come from my new partners. There was a certain poetic justice in watching Richard toast to his own promotion while I was, in complete secrecy, becoming his boss. It's like that old saying about karma my Aunt Odette loves to quote, except I was giving karma a little nudge with a rocket booster. And I was doing it in style. Have you ever spent 3 hours getting ready just to look like you've completely given up on life? Yeah, me neither. Until that fateful Monday when I walked back into TexPro. I had invested so much time into crafting my total failure persona that I almost ran late. First, I hit up a few thrift stores and bought clothes that were at least 3 sizes too big. Next, I swapped my designer glasses for a pair of enormous square frames that made my face look like a disgruntled potato. But the masterstroke? I had my hair dyed a shade I can only describe as mousy brown surrender, and asked the stylist for a blunt, single-length cut, the kind our moms used to give us with kitchen scissors. "Oh my God, Hannah, what happened to you?" Trish whispered the moment she saw me shuffle into the office. She was the only one in on the plan. Well, not the whole plan, but at least the visual transformation part. You take 3 months off and come back looking worn out. I managed a practiced, weary shrug. Life happens, Trish. Some people are born to be stars. Others are meant to crunch the numbers backstage. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Richard approaching with that predatory shark-like grin. "Hannah, long time no see. Listen, I found the perfect spot for you on the secondary data analysis team. It's a role that's well-suited to your current profile." Translation: it was the most mind-numbingly boring job in the entire company, analyzing datasets no one ever looked at. The highlight of my return, however, was unveiling my new old mode of transportation, the 1995 Ford Escort. Its engine made a noise like a dying tractor, and it puffed out a suspicious-looking cloud of smoke, but it was perfect for my purposes. I made a point of strategically parking it right next to Richard's reserved spot, where his gleaming black BMW 7 Series sat as if it had just rolled off the showroom floor. As I got out of my Escort, I accidentally let my oversized tote bag drag along the side of his car, creating a tiny scratch, too small to file a formal complaint, but just large enough to drive him absolutely insane. Was it cruel? Perhaps. Was it satisfying? Absolutely. And this was just the opening act of my meticulously orchestrated plan to reclaim what was rightfully mine. Would you have done it differently? So, about that proposal for restructuring the finance department. I began meekly during the next team meeting, hunching my shoulders as if I fully expected to be shot down. Richard didn't disappoint. "Hannah, sweetie, why don't you leave the complex strategy to those of us with a 30,000-foot view of the business, okay?" He smiled that condescending smile I had anticipated. "But hey, maybe you could organize the monthly expense reports alphabetically? That would be a huge help." An awkward silence fell over the room as I mumbled, "Of course, no problem," and began scribbling notes as if his words were gospel. 3 hours later, I accidentally left a detailed analysis on his desk, showing how restructuring the Asian supply chain contracts would save the company $2 million per quarter. I made sure to type it in Comic Sans on bright pink paper to look as amateurish as possible. The next day, just as I predicted, Richard presented my entire proposal as his own, without changing a single word, except for replacing my name with his at the top of the report. "Brilliant strategy, Richard," the CEO exclaimed, thoroughly impressed. I offered a discreet smile as I remotely activated the mini camera hidden in my lapel pin, capturing the entire moment for posterity. It was exhibit number 37 for the folder I labeled Richard's Demise. That night, back in my duplex penthouse overlooking Lady Bird Lake, a fact completely unknown to anyone at the office, I poured a glass of crisp Chardonnay. I sank into my jacuzzi tub while listening to the day's recordings. That washed-up woman with the Ford Escort actually had a workable idea, Richard was telling the marketing director in the men's restroom. But she's lost her executive edge, poor thing. Came back completely defeated. I let out a laugh so loud my neighbors probably thought I was watching a Netflix comedy special. If only they knew my nightly entertainment consisted of listening to the man who stole my career dig his own professional grave. My phone buzzed while I was still in the tub. It was Trish. "Hannah, this is insane. You basically own the company and you're letting them treat you like this." I shook my head, splashing foam everywhere. "It's not insane, Trish. It's strategic management. Except instead of managing assets, I'm managing the downfall of an asset." After 2 months of playing the role of the traumatized, submissive employee, I knew it was time to set the stage for the grand finale. TexPro was hosting a delegation of South Korean investors that afternoon, potential partners Richard had been trying to woo for weeks. The meeting was so critical that he'd sent a company-wide email, in bold, italics, and underlined, as if he were screaming at us through the screen. "VIP parking is reserved exclusively for our guests. Any unauthorized vehicles will be towed." For me, this read less like a warning and more like a personal invitation. An invitation for me and my trusty Escort, which I had now decorated with peeling kitten bumper stickers, a giant pair of fuzzy dice hanging from the rearview mirror, and a pine tree air freshener so potent it could give you a headache from 30 feet away. I arrived an hour before the investors were due, parking my glorious Ford Escort diagonally across 2 VIP spaces, positioning it at an angle that screamed, "I learned to drive playing Grand Theft Auto." To complete this masterpiece of passive aggression, I left the radio on, blasting Barry Manilow's Copacabana at a considerable volume. The song choice was anything but random. I had discovered that Richard harbored a deep, irrational hatred for Barry Manilow ever since a college girlfriend broke up with him during one of the singer's concerts. You see, it's the little details that truly make a revenge plot sing, isn't it? I strategically hid behind a concrete pillar with 3 different mini-cameras perfectly positioned and an expression of pure, unadulterated anticipation on my face. Did I go too far with the "I break for squirrels" bumper sticker? I briefly wondered. Nah, the Pine Tree air freshener was the real chef's kiss. Nothing screams total and complete failure, quite like a car that smells like a freshly cleaned gas station restroom. Richard's arrival in the parking garage was a cinematic event. He was behind the wheel of his gleaming BMW, with the South Korean investors following closely in a black town car. His face, initially composed into a smooth luxury real estate agent's smile, contorted into a mask of sheer horror as his eyes landed on my Escort, so majestically occupying his designated territory. First came the shock, then the disbelief, and finally, my personal favorite part, that little vein in his temple that started throbbing, signaling an imminent eruption. It was like watching a volcano rumble to life in slow motion, all while Barry Manilow crooned about Lola and her yellow feathers. The irony was so rich, so delicious, I almost felt bad for him. Almost. What is this nonsense? Richard bellowed, momentarily forgetting he was standing just feet away from the very important executives he was trying to impress. He slammed his car door with such force I was sure the window would shatter. His face was as red as a jalapeno, and he gestured wildly at my Escort as if it were a personal affront to his very existence. It was at this moment I noticed other employees beginning to gather, drawn by the commotion. Perfect. The more witnesses, the better. My cameras were capturing everything in glorious HD, but there's nothing quite like good old-fashioned human testimony. This was my cue. I shuffled out from behind the pillar, feigning a return from the corner deli with a giant, cheap styrofoam cup of coffee in hand. Is something wrong? I stammered, playing the part of the startled, timid employee to perfection. Richard spun around to face me like a bull spotting a red cape. "This," he roared, jabbing a finger toward my car. "This rolling piece of garbage is in the VIP spots. It's yours, isn't it?" It had to be. The Korean investors were now watching the scene unfold with a mixture of shock and profound awkwardness, as their translator whispered frantically in an attempt to explain the meltdown. A small crowd had formed, including 3 department heads who, rather than de-escalating the situation, seemed to be secretly enjoying the free entertainment. "Your junk is ruining our image!" That was the final blow, shouted with enough force that a woman walking on the sidewalk outside the garage actually stopped to stare. I bowed my head, committing fully to the role of the victim. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize these were reserved," I mumbled, purposefully spilling a little coffee on my blouse to enhance the pathetic effect. A complete lie, of course. There were massive signs that read VIP parking in letters so large a legally blind person couldn't miss them. But Richard was far beyond the reach of logic at this point. The climax came when he, in front of everyone, investors included, took out his keys and deliberately dragged them down the side of my Escort's door on his way to his own spot. "There," he sneered. "Now it matches the rest of the junk pile. Bingo. Destruction of property." Captured on video from 3 angles and witnessed by at least 15 people. As I turned away, pretending to fight back tears, I couldn't help but smile on the inside. Checkmate, darling. That night, my apartment looked less like a home and more like a CIA operations center. 3 open laptops displayed different angles of the parking lot incident, as I had affectionately nicknamed it. On a giant projector screen against the wall, yes, I bought a giant screen just for this moment, and I have 0 regrets, I assembled a presentation worthy of a Supreme Court case. Richard Novak, Anatomy of a Fraud. I spent nearly an hour fiddling with the fonts until I found the perfect balance between professional polish and moral outrage. Georgia for the titles, Calibri for the body text. No Comic Sans this time. The joke was over. The dossier was divided into 5 key sections. Professional sabotage, complete with the deleted emails I had recovered with a little help from Louisa's hacktivist husband. Financial fraud, highlighting the alterations Richard had made to the quarterly reports, a potential SEC violation, workplace harassment, a compilation of 47 separate audio and video recorded incidents, gender discrimination, featuring gems like women are too emotional for leadership roles, and of course, the pièce du resistance, destruction of property, the video of him keying my car, synced from all 3 camera angles. I even added a soundtrack to that last one, Celine Dion's My Heart Will Go On. Because, well, I have a sense of humor. With a glass of Napa Valley Cabernet in hand, a bottle that cost more than a week's salary at my current position, I sat on my couch and admired my handiwork. Tomorrow was the day, the board meeting where Richard would present his doctored numbers, completely unaware that I would be in attendance, not as a lowly, incompetent analyst, but as the new majority shareholder. I placed a call to my legal team, because yes, I had a legal team now, a fact that still made me laugh to myself sometimes. Is everything set for tomorrow? I asked Ms. Evans, a corporate lawyer so ruthless they say sharks have pictures of her on their walls for inspiration. All prepared, Ms. Campbell. The transfer of controlling interest documents will be presented at exactly 10:45 a.m., immediately following Mr. Novak's presentation. I smiled, feeling that exhilarating cocktail of anticipation and nerves that I imagine mountaineers feel just before they reach the summit. Perfect. And the helicopter? Confirmed for 2 p.m. for the company-wide town hall. I took a deep breath and gazed out at the Austin skyline from my floor-to-ceiling window. I'd always wondered what it would feel like to hold the world in your hands. Tomorrow, I would finally find out. There are some mornings when you wake up and you just know your entire life is about to change. That Wednesday, I was awake at 5:17 a.m. No alarm needed. My whole body was vibrating with that strange electric energy you only feel before a truly defining moment. You know that feeling? Right before you're about to do something so huge it feels like a movie? That was exactly it. For the day's performance, I had carefully selected my 2 distinct identities. First up was defeated Hannah, dressed in a hopelessly drab beige pantsuit and my signature oversized tortoiseshell glasses. Waiting in a briefcase in the trunk of my car was Avenger Hannah, ready for her debut in a stunning crimson Valentino power suit. The TexPro Analytics boardroom had always been designed to intimidate with its colossal mahogany table that looked like it was stolen from the set of Billions. I quietly found a seat in the back, in the corporate equivalent of the nosebleed section, where junior employees are summoned to present their data before being dismissed. When Richard strode in, he didn't even glance my way. He was far too busy straightening his Italian silk tie and flashing smiles around the room as if he were running for office. The clock on the wall seemed to tick in agonizing slow motion. Every second felt like a drumbeat in the countdown to Richard Novak's personal apocalypse. Gentlemen of the board, it is my distinct pleasure to present our quarterly financial results, he began, using that booming, self-important voice he clearly practiced in the mirror. Yes, I once caught him doing it in the men's restroom. It's a long story. The numbers that flashed on the screen were a work of art, a beautiful fiction of 17% growth, massive cost reductions, and successful international expansion. All of it, of course, was a lie. I watched as each board member nodded in approval, completely mesmerized by the well-crafted fraud. My hand was slick with sweat around my pen as I doodled on a notepad, trying to look bored out of my mind when in reality, every nerve was on fire. 10:43 a.m. Just 2 minutes until showtime. Does he even look handsome when he's lying? I wondered. He looked like a 5-year-old, face smeared with chocolate, swearing he never touched the cake. Before we conclude, the CEO announced, after Richard had finished his fantasy-laden presentation, we have a new member of the board to introduce. My heart hammered against my ribs as if I'd just chugged 5 espressos. I rose and slipped out of the room, unnoticed, as the CEO continued. A recent significant acquisition of shares has brought us a new business partner. Inside the sterile silence of the executive restroom, I underwent a transformation of record speed. The mousy brown wig was ripped off. Yes, it was a wig. Sacrificing my actual hair would have been a bridge too far, even for this revenge. The giant glasses came off. A slash of bold red lipstick was applied. And then, the Valentino suit. Avenger Hannah had arrived. The look on Richard's face when I walked back into that boardroom was worth every penny and every sleepless night. At first, there was just confusion. He clearly didn't recognize me without the pathetic disguise. Then came the slow, agonizing dawn of recognition, as if he were looking at a ghost. Finally, pure, unadulterated terror washed over him as the CEO declared, "Allow me to introduce Hannah Campbell, our new majority shareholder, now holding a 51% stake in TexPro Analytics." The coffee cup in Richard's hand tilted, spilling a dark brown stain all over his crisp white shirt. The shape it formed was uncannily like the state of Texas. No one else seemed to notice. They were all too busy staring at me as if I had just beamed down from a spaceship. "Good morning, everyone," I said, my voice steady as I took my place at the head of the table, the seat traditionally reserved for the primary shareholder. "I believe some of you may know me as the analyst from the third floor who drives a Ford Escort." I smiled directly at Richard, who looked like he was experiencing a small, silent aneurysm. Others might remember me as the senior financial manager who was passed over for a promotion a few months ago. I paused for dramatic effect, adjusting the microphone. "But today I am here as the majority owner of this company." I glanced at the clock, 10:45 a.m. on the dot. My lawyer, Ms. Evans, entered right on cue, carrying a crimson folder that held all the official transfer documents. "And I have a few observations regarding the presentation we all just witnessed. Can you believe someone actually choked on their water? I always thought that was just a cliché from the movies, but the COO proved me wrong." I stood up, feeling a surge of confidence I never knew I possessed. Taking the projector's remote control, I clicked, and Richard's presentation vanished, replaced by my own. The title, "The Truth About TexPro, Numbers, Facts, and Fraud," appeared in bold letters. "Gentlemen, what you've just seen was a work of fiction worthy of a Golden Globe nomination." My voice was surprisingly firm. Someone in the room let out a nervous chuckle, assuming it was a joke. It wasn't. "Allow me to present the company's real numbers without the creative accounting." Slide by methodical slide, I dismantled every lie Richard had told. The contrast between his vibrant, ascending charts and my stark, descending red graphs was breathtaking. "This is our actual financial position," I explained, revealing the catastrophic state of the Asian contracts that Richard had conveniently forgotten to include. And that is just the beginning. I then moved to the second part of my presentation, Corporate Ethics, a Case Study. The video from the parking garage filled the screen, showing Richard in his full, unhinged glory. "Your junk is ruining our image." His voice boomed through the now deathly silent room. The footage continued with a meticulously edited compilation. Richard instructing IT to delete my emails, secretly filmed by Louisa's husband. Richard laughing with other directors about putting the girls in their place, recorded at a company happy hour. Richard telling his team to fudge the numbers, captured by a spy pen I'd given his assistant as a secret Santa gift. Yes, I thought of everything. I ended the show with the high-definition video of him keying my Ford Escort, set to the theme from Titanic. Was it a bit much? Probably. Was it immensely satisfying? Absolutely. When the lights came up, Richard had physically slumped in his chair, looking as though he had aged a decade in 20 minutes. He tried to speak, but all that came out was a strangled sound like a dying goose. "Richard," I said calmly, "do you have anything to add? Perhaps something about parking your car in the wrong spot, darling? In my company?" The silence in the room was so thick you could cut it with a butter knife. Every eye in the boardroom darted between me, standing tall with the remote still in my hand, and Richard, who had crumpled into his expensive chair like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar. The CEO, Mr. Davenport, was the first to find his voice. "Well, Ms. Campbell, this is extraordinary. I assume Mr. Novak will be—" He trailed off, clearly searching for the right word, something between terminated and ejected from the 10th floor window. I held up a hand, cutting him off. "I'm not firing Richard. Not yet." A confused murmur rippled through the boardroom. The expressions around the table ranged from shock to visible disappointment, especially from those who clearly despised him. "Doesn't everyone deserve a second chance?" I smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the kind of smile a great white shark might give if it had lips. Richard possesses certain undeniable talents. It would be a waste of potential to simply discard him. I walked slowly around the massive table, my heels clicking softly on the polished floor until I stood directly behind his chair. Placing my hands on his shoulders, I felt him go rigid beneath my touch. That's why I'm creating a new department, the Office of Ethical Leadership and Corporate Transparency, and Richard will be its new director. I opened a folder and had Ms. Evans distribute the documents outlining the new position and its unique parameters. The terms are quite simple: a 70% reduction in salary, an office relocation to the sub-level, the one without windows, you know the one, and weekly progress reports submitted directly to me. I paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. Oh, and one more thing. As a symbol of his commitment to authentic values over superficial status, Richard's new official company vehicle will be my old Ford Escort. The room erupted in poorly suppressed snickers. Richard finally found his voice, choking out the words, This is public humiliation." I leaned down and whispered, just loud enough for the entire room to hear, "No, darling, this is poetic justice. Public humiliation was what you did to me in that parking garage." I straightened up, addressing the entire board. Destruction is easy. Transformation, now that's real power. 4 hours later, the chartered helicopter descended onto the large grassy field behind the TexPro Analytics campus, where the annual company town hall was in full swing. From inside the cabin, I could see hundreds of employees gathered below, all staring up, wondering which tech billionaire or rock star was making such a dramatic entrance. To be honest, I'd always found helicopter entrances a bit much, a little too Tony Stark for my taste. But damn it, after months of pretending to be invisible, I had earned my diva moment. The pilot gave me a thumbs up. "Ready, Miss Campbell?" I took a deep breath. More than ready. As I stepped out of the helicopter, desperately trying to keep my hair from turning into a bird's nest in the rotor wash, they never warn you about that part in the movies, the collective gasp from the crowd was priceless. My loyal friend Trish was right at the front, grinning like she'd just won the Powerball. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him. Richard was pulling up, in the Ford Escort. He had accepted the challenge. The car was clean, at least, but it was still unmistakably a 1995 forest green Escort. The event MC handed me a microphone. "Good afternoon, TexPro. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Hannah Campbell, and I am your new CEO and majority shareholder." The speech I gave wasn't about revenge. It was about a revolution. I talked about how appearances can be deceiving, locking eyes with a few of the people who had openly snickered at me, about true value versus artificial status, and about what genuine meritocracy looks like. Starting today, this company will value substance over style, competence over connections, and ethics over image. I announced our new internal corporate campaign, Substance Over Surface, and revealed that Richard's Escort would become our unofficial company mascot. Because sometimes the simplest vehicle can take you further than the most luxurious one, provided it's in the right hands. I spotted Richard in the crowd, his face a strange cocktail of shame and, could that be a flicker of admiration? No, impossible. But there was something there, a kind of grudging acknowledgement. Our eyes met for a brief moment across the field, and I could have sworn I saw him give the slightest nod, as if to say, "Well played." To the surprise of many, TexPro didn't just survive under my leadership, it thrived. Over the next 6 months, we executed a stunning turnaround. The restructuring plan I'd originally authored, the one Richard had stolen, was implemented flawlessly. The Asian contracts were successfully renegotiated, and our newfound radical transparency attracted a wave of new investors who valued ethical corporate governance. Even more surprising? Richard was actually good at his new job. As the Director of Ethical Leadership, he developed a genuinely impressive corporate transparency program. His workshops on the subject started getting attention from other companies in the tech corridor, and the irony of an ex-fraudster teaching corporate ethics even landed him a small feature in Fast Company. The Ford Escort became a local legend. Cleaned and fully restored, while intentionally keeping its vintage, unpretentious look, it was now displayed in the main lobby with a small brass plaque. "Don't judge a book by its cover or a company by its employee's car." It became a tradition for new hires to take a selfie with it on their first day. Richard still used it as his official transport, but strangely, he seemed to have made peace with it. I once saw him in the parking lot, carefully polishing the hood with a microfiber cloth with a tenderness he never showed his old BMW. Forbes named me their breakout CEO of the year, running a long feature on how I secretly bought the company I worked for and revolutionized its culture. The cover photo? Me, in my Valentino suit, leaning against the green Ford Escort. Aunt Odette had the magazine professionally framed and hung it in her living room in Annapolis, right next to the photo of my parents. "Your mother would be so proud," she told me over the phone, her voice thick with emotion. "Using the money from her house to build your own empire? She would have loved this story." For the first time since my plan began, a flicker of doubt entered my mind. Was this all really about justice? Or was it just about my own wounded ego? But then the quarterly reports came in, showing another record-breaking period of growth, and I decided it could be about both. After all, who says revenge and success can't go hand in hand? On a particularly hectic Friday afternoon, I called Richard for a private meeting. My office was sleek and modern without being ostentatious, a far cry from the former CEO's suite, which looked like it was straight off the set of Mad Men with all its dark mahogany and leather. Richard entered hesitantly, as he always did for our weekly check-ins. 6 months hadn't been enough to erase the awkward tension between us. "Have a seat," I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. He looked nervous, probably expecting another demeaning task. Instead, I pushed a file folder across the desk toward him. "What's this?" he asked, not touching it. "Your new contract," I replied, twirling a pen between my fingers. "I'm offering you your old position back, Chief Financial Officer, with the original salary." His eyes widened in disbelief. "But why? After everything I did," I shrugged. "You've worked your tail off for 6 months. Your ethics program is a genuine success, and from what I can tell, your probation is over. The lesson has been learned." I leaned forward, my voice dropping slightly. "Besides, you're brilliant with numbers when you're not trying to cook the books. This company needs that talent." He opened the folder gingerly, as if expecting a spring-loaded snake to pop out. "There is one condition, of course." "The Escort," he guessed, letting out a long, resigned sigh. I smiled. "The Escort. It remains your official company car, a daily reminder." Richard nodded, and then he did something that genuinely caught me off guard. He smiled back. It was a real smile, not that plastic salesman grin he used to wear. "You know," he admitted, "I've actually grown fond of that old bucket of bolts. I'm saving a fortune on gas." He stood to leave but paused at the door. "Why didn't you just destroy me, Hannah? It would have been easier." I slid a small, printed card across my desk. On it was a single question. "Is true power found in destroying an enemy or in transforming one?" He read it in silence. "Something for you to think about on your drive home. In the Escort." After he left, I sat there for a long time, just thinking about the past few months. The intricate revenge I had plotted hadn't played out exactly as I'd imagined. It had become something bigger, something more meaningful. I glanced down at the brilliant diamond on my finger, a gift from Thomas, the Japanese investor who had backed my acquisition and who, after months of professional emails, had finally asked me to dinner. Who knew a malicious corporate takeover could come with a fiancé? Life really is full of surprises. Swiveling in my chair, I looked out the panoramic window at the Austin skyline. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but reconciliation, that's a much sweeter dessert. And I've always had a sweet tooth. If you had told me 2 years ago that I'd be inaugurating the new TexPro Analytics headquarters with a pair of oversized scissors and a ceremonial ribbon, I would have laughed in your face. But there I was, in a sharp navy blue dress, from Kohl's, because some things never change. Why waste money on designer clothes when you can buy more stock? Smiling for photographers as I snipped a ribbon that read, "The New Era of TexPro," in glittering gold letters. Our new glass tower on Congress Avenue represented everything we had achieved. Transparency, literally, with all that glass. Stability, and a crystal-clear vision for the future. "Speech! Speech!" someone shouted from the crowd of employees gathered for the ceremony. I rolled my eyes playfully, but stepped up to the podium. Exactly 1 year ago, TexPro was on the verge of both financial and moral collapse, I began, my gaze sweeping over the attentive faces. Today, we've tripled our market value, we have the lowest employee turnover rate in the industry, and we just won Fortune's Best Place to Work award. Enthusiastic applause broke out. But more importantly, I continued, we've built a culture where it doesn't matter if you drive a BMW or a Ford Escort. What matters is your character and your competence. My eyes found Richard in the front row. He was smiling, standing next to his new girlfriend, an architect he met at one of his own corporate ethics workshops. The irony was not lost on me. He had gone from a corporate villain to a respected and, dare I say, genuinely ethical executive. The old green Escort was now permanently installed in the new building's lobby, encased in a glass atrium like a piece of contemporary art. Visitors always asked about it, and the story had become a legend in the Austin tech scene. Have you heard about the CEO who secretly bought the company after her boss mocked her car? Who needs a killer LinkedIn profile when you have a beat-up old car and a great revenge story? So, are we finally having that dinner? Trish asked, gesturing to the elegantly set table at the new headquarters rooftop restaurant. It was an intimate celebration for the board and a few key employees who had been there since the beginning. Champagne sparkled in crystal flutes as the Texas sunset painted a cinematic backdrop. This celebratory dinner is about a year overdue, I replied, glancing over the menu. I'd specifically requested a seafood tower because I happen to know Richard has a mild shellfish allergy. Okay, so maybe a tiny part of me is still a little bit petty. In the middle of the main course, as conversation flowed, Richard unexpectedly stood up, glass in hand. A curious hush fell over the table. I'd like to propose a toast, he announced, looking uncharacteristically nervous. To Hannah Campbell, a person who had every right to destroy me, but chose to rebuild me instead. Wow, I did not see that coming. When she revealed she was the new owner, I was sure my career was over. Instead, he paused, searching for the right words. I was given a second chance I didn't deserve, and a lesson I will never forget. He raised his glass higher. To the old car that ended up saving 2 careers in one company. We all toasted. For the first time, our eyes met across the table without a trace of hostility or awkwardness. You know, I said, once the chatter resumed, I never told anyone the full story behind that Escort. Everyone leaned in. It belonged to my father. 30 years ago, he founded a small startup called Innovatech Dynamics, the very first company that TexPro acquired when it began to expand. I saw the light bulbs go on in their eyes. My dad drove that car for years, long after he could have afforded something better. Never forget where you came from, he always told me. I raised my own glass. Sometimes we find ourselves right back where we started, only as entirely different people. The next day, I did something I'd been putting off. I woke up early, pulled on jeans and a plain t-shirt, my weekend uniform, and drove to the quiet cemetery where my parents were buried. It wasn't a special occasion, no anniversary or birthday, but I felt like I needed to talk to them. I sat on the grass between the 2 simple headstones, placing fresh flowers on each. Hey, Mom! Hey, Dad! It's been a while, huh? I started, feeling a little foolish talking to the air, but I kept going. You remember that company that bought out yours all those years ago? Well, it's mine now. I told them everything. The revenge plot, the disguise, the dramatic reveal, the unexpected transformation. I don't know if you'd be proud of the whole revenge part, I admitted, plucking a dry leaf from my mother's headstone. But I think you'd like how it turned out. We saved the company and we built something better. I paused, feeling the warm morning sun on my face. And Dad's Escort? It's sitting in the lobby of the new building, like a museum piece. I laughed, imagining what my practical, no-nonsense father would think of that. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the oak trees around me. I chose to take it as a sign of their approval. Back at my penthouse, I settled onto the balcony with my laptop and a giant mug of coffee. My fiancé, Thomas, was in Tokyo, finalizing his business affairs before making the permanent move to Austin. On my computer screen was a blank document with a single blinking cursor under the title, From Escort to Executive, An Unlikely Guide to Corporate Revenge and Redemption. I chuckled at the ridiculous title. The idea of writing a book about my experience had started as a private joke, But the more I considered it, the more it made sense. I'd already been fielding requests to give keynote speeches about my unconventional entrepreneurial journey, which was the understatement of the year. With the Austin skyline stretching out before me as the sun began its slow descent, I started to type. Some people seek revenge, others seek redemption. I was lucky enough to find both. The words flowed with an unexpected ease, as if this story had simply been waiting for the right moment to be told. My phone buzzed. A text from Richard. The Escort needs new spark plugs. Should I authorize the repair, or do you want to maintain its historical authenticity? I smiled at the screen. Of all the insane twists and turns in this story, the reluctant, respectful rapport that was growing between us was perhaps the most surprising of all. Life is funny that way, isn't it? You set out to orchestrate an epic takedown, and you end up with a company, a fiancé, and, well, not quite a friend, but something remarkably close. And it all started with a 1995 forest green Ford Escort. Who would have thought? You have no idea how many people ask me if I regret my elaborate scheme. The answer is complicated. Do I regret spending months pretending to be someone I'm not? Absolutely not. Those months taught me more about human nature and myself than any expensive MBA program ever could. Do I regret being a little cruel to Richard? Maybe a touch. But as my Aunt Odette always says, a good slice of humble pie is good for the character. And you know what? She's right. At least, it certainly was in his case. What began as a story about revenge morphed into something entirely different. Revenge is like binge-eating a pint of ice cream when you're heartbroken. It's incredibly satisfying in the moment, but afterward, you just feel a little sick. Transformation, on the other hand, that's like committing to a healthy lifestyle. It's not as instantly gratifying, but the long-term results are infinitely better for everyone. The TexPro of today isn't just more profitable, it's a better place to work. People aren't afraid to park their beat-up old cars in the lot. No one is judged by the brand of their suit or the age of their vehicle. And it all began because one arrogant executive made fun of the wrong car. If there's one lesson I've learned on this wild ride, it's that true power isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about changing the rules of the entire game. When Richard shouted, "Your junk is ruining our image," he had no idea he was writing his own destiny. Today, as I fly over Austin in our corporate helicopter, yes, we bought one, some extravagances are worth it, I sometimes look down and can still spot the little green dot of the Escort in the executive parking lot. Some might call that poetic vengeance. I prefer to call it justice, with a flair for the dramatic, of course. After all, what's the point of life without a little theater?